Let's hope I can accurately get my words out for this one. For the past 3 Carter's Corners, I've talked about a board game, I've talked about a video game, and I've talked about a wrestler. And I think it's time to talk about another completely different hobby of mine, and this time I'm going to talk about music. So I've been thinking recently, what makes a cover song really stand out from the original song that it's covering? Whenever you listen to music, you can kind of get a feel for what you like, and you kind of get a feel for what you don't like. I know what kind of music gravitates my interest, but I also tend to listen to a lot of different kind of genres of music. The only ones, say, being like mainstream pop and country are probably the 2 that I don't really listen to that much. But I find that like my musical influences have been all over the place. That's fine. That's kind of where I find a lot of my inspiration is from listening to certain music. And I realized that there was something that was always interesting me, and that involves these 2 songs in the title description. And it's the 2 versions that I have found here of Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper. So when you listen to a cover song specifically, you kind of have a gauge of whether or not the cover song is good, like great, or bad. A bad cover song is when you kind of listen to it and you're like, this isn't really my cup of tea, and you're just not feeling it, and you don't really want to listen to it again. Sometimes you'll have a cover song where you don't like it at first, but you listen to it over and over again, you start to understand more and more of it, you start to like it more. Bear in mind, I'm going to say this right off the bat, I don't have a musical background, so just everything I'm talking about, I'm just a average Joe given my experience or what I'm thinking about these songs and this music. So when you get into what makes a song good, you're kind of listening more to the instruments and how it sounds. Most of the time the lyrics are going to stay the same. The lyrics are not going to be changed, because then you're kind of changing the original song, and that's not really true to what a cover is. Unless there's like a particular artistic choice and artistic reason that you're changing the lyrics. That's here or there. But there's very few cover songs that I think belong in the great category, the ones that really stand out. And you could make a case that the great songs are just as good or better than the original songs that that they're covering their song of. There's very few that you can kind of give this give this kind of moniker to. One of the best examples off the top of my head is Hurt. Now, Hurt is a song that was originally written by Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails. He penned this song back in 1994. And when you listen to this song, it's very doom and gloom. It's very much in the style of a 9 Inch Nails song, where it's very kind of like emotionally draining. It's very heavy and it's very depressing. But in very much like Trent Reznor always makes music like that really kind of like hits you hard, and kind of like it's kind of masochistic to listen to it in a way, if that makes any sense. But then you had someone like Johnny Cash cover Hurt in 2003, and with Johnny Cash's version, there's a whole bunch of added context to the fact that this was one of the last songs that he ever essentially played before his death. It was littered with so many hidden messages about, not even hidden messages out in the way the video was edited, in the way that you could kind of feel the emotion in his voice, that this song was it was made for Johnny Cash at that point in his life. It was an avenue that he used to kind of get all of his last words out for everyone. His apologies, his sorrows, all the wrongs that he's done in his life, everything that he had built up to that, built up to in his career at that point. He was kind of just letting it out on the table at this point. And I bet you 9 out of 10 people that you talk to are going to say that they like Johnny Cash's version better than Trent Reznor's version, because Trent Reznor's song, his version of Hurt, just sounds like a Nine Inch Nails song. But with Johnny Cash's, there was an added extra emotional layer to it, where it's like there was a story here, and it was something that you could really admire, even if you weren't a country fan, because I'm not a country fan. But this is a song that I can just listen to, and I can appreciate it for its artistic liberties that it adds. And it's not changing any of the lyrics, it's just changing how the music sounds for the listener, in a way. Again, I'm not musically trained, and this is literally me just coming at this from my own average Joe perspective. But I was trying to think if there was any other songs that kind of had like that sort of history to them, where the cover song had added anything new that the original didn't have or didn't even think about at the time, and turned it into a really interesting listen, because music is subjective. Not everyone's going to like it. The way you feel about a song reflects on the journeys that you've had over your lifetime, or things that you like or are interested in. That's kind of going to shape your musical tastes. And for these two versions of Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper, I feel like they both tackle the same issue, but with two completely different ways of going about it. So before we continue, I would ask anyone who has not heard these two versions, I will link both of them in the description below. We have Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper, and we have Ninja Sex Party's Don't Fear the Reaper. I'm going to talk about each of them, and I'm going to kind of explain their differing methods to the same concept that they're preaching here. And yeah, I'm just gonna, I can wait. I'll put a little disclaimer here. So I got my first tub of G Fuel today. That was good. I got it 30% off. Thanks, Doug. Okay, we good? Okay, so now that you've listened to both, hopefully you've listened to both and you've taken my advice, we're going to start with Blue Oyster Cult's version. So Blue Oyster Cult's version, also keep in mind, I can't play any of the music here because of YouTube, so just have that version of Blue Oyster Cult in like another tab and just kind of like listen to it again. Same with the Ninja Sex Party version. So with these two versions, they kind of approach this concept of overcoming death in a way, kind of accepting death, that death is a real thing. And with this in mind, these two versions of the song kind of go about portraying that message of accepting death in two completely different ways. With Blue Oyster Cult's version, they focus a lot on the lyrics. Now, you don't really hear any sort of crazy differentiation until you get to like in the instruments, what instruments you're using, and there's no like major change until you get to the guitar solo, and then they bring it back to what you've already been listening to between the first two verses. Now, with these three verses, their messaging of like understanding what death does in these three separate scenarios is kind of spread out between these three separate verses. And most of the weight here of the song is conveyed through these lyrics. So why don't we focus on the lyrics itself, and we'll kind of get an understanding for how this song approaches the acceptance of death. So lyrically speaking, this song focuses on the lyrics and the message behind them. So we're going to go verse by verse And there's 3 verses. The first verse is all about this dealing with the end of time and days, the end of the world. As you can see, with all our times have come, here but now they're gone. Seasons don't fear the reaper, nor do the wind, the sun, or the rain. We can be like they are. Again, most of this is subjective, but to me that screams that this whole verse is about dealing with kind of the inevitability that sooner or later there's going to be an end of the world. That's going to happen. It sucks to say that, but the sun will explode at some point, maybe far, far, far into the future, but that's going to happen. Death is an inevitability. Death is going to be an inevitability in all of our lives, which sucks to talk about, but it's something that is going to happen, and it's something that we should accept. That is mostly what happens for the first verse. The second verse starts dealing with the death of loved ones, and it focuses heavily on Romeo and Juliet, the most famous love story ever told. But if you know Romeo and Juliet, you know how that ends, and it ends with this same concept. As you can see with the second verse, Valentine is done, here but now they're gone. Romeo and Juliet are together in eternity. Romeo and Juliet, 40,000 men and women every day, like Romeo and Juliet. 40,000 men and women every day. Redefine happiness. Another 40,000 coming every day. We can be like they are. So this is very much talking about couples who have taken their lives in suicide because the relationship was not supported in a way. So this is a completely different way of approaching death than the first verse. But this is another very real outlook of how death is perceived. You can't stop Romeo and Juliet if they're both gone, is the idea. You cannot stop their love if they leave together. That's mainly what the second verse deals with, but it can actually be looked at with any group of loved ones. It doesn't have to be like romantic. It could probably be platonic as well. But then you get to the guitar solo, and then after the guitar solo, you get into the third verse. It reads as follows. Love of 2 is 1, here but now they're gone. Came the last night of sadness, and it was clear she couldn't go on. Then the door was open, and the wind appeared. The candles blew, then disappeared. The curtains flew, then he appeared, saying, don't be afraid. Come on, baby. And she had no fear, and she ran to him. And it goes back into the chorus. But this part of the song feels very storybook ending in a way. But you have 2 different schools of thought when you go into this. One is the very, very real, depressing side, which is we may have just read about someone who just committed suicide by jumping out their window. The other half feels very Peter Pan-esque. Which, if you don't know Peter Pan that much, it was... well, Peter Pan came in through... I didn't watch Peter Pan that much, but he came through the kids' windows, took them off to Neverland, out through their window, flying high in the sky. Not everything's storybook, but yeah, I feel like that was the third verse accepting the act of suicide in a way, accepting that it's a real thing and that it happens. That's what I think about for that. But it's kind of ironic that that ending is very storybook, because then you get to Ninja Sex Party's version of this cover song, and this cover of Don't Fear the Reaper was on their 3rd volume of covers that they had done. Most of these cover songs that they've put out on these albums have been 80s songs, 70s or 80s songs. Don't Fear the Reaper is no exception, as the song came out in the mid-80s. So Ninja Sex Party's version is really interesting because you can't really change the lyrics that much. So in a way for this song to stand out, they did something completely different. They actually had the song sound like it was flowing through a 3-act structure, like a story. And in this way, throughout these 3 different acts that you have in this version of the song, you have 3 different feelings, and it follows this very specific structure, which I will explain by the time we get to the end. So, with Ninja Sex Party's version, now switch over to Ninja Sex Party's version at this point. With Ninja Sex Party's version, the lyrics are the same. You don't change those lyrics because they convey a very strong message about death and the acceptance of death. That is the whole point of the song. And the story, the way that the song sounds, is going to follow a different structure to this. So, the first act includes the first 2 verses of the song. So, the first 2 verses, the first one being about the end of time, the end of the world, and the second verse about Romeo and Juliet. So this is the first act of the song, and this is notable because this section of the song, this first half, sounds a lot more somber and more acoustic than the original version. And in my mind, when I hear this version of the first act, these first 2 verses, this all cuts off towards the guitar solo. Everything in that first half of the song, this is very much like a prequel to the original. This is someone who is being confronted with the very real realization that death is going to happen very, very soon, and they are not prepared for it. They're in denial, so to speak. They are really not ready for this, and everyone else is confronting them, but they're choosing to ignore it. But they're still just really, really sad that it's happening. They don't want to believe that it's happening. That's what makes this so sad. By the time you get to the end of the first half, you're filled with these thoughts of denial and failure in a way, for something that's just this person is unable to face the concept of death yet, because maybe it's the first time it's happened to them. Maybe it's with someone so close. Maybe they're a child and they don't fully understand it yet. So this whole first act is all about denial, just based on the way that the music sounds. It sounds a lot more somber, it sounds a lot more sad, it uses more violins, it uses acoustic guitar, no drums, no cowbell. It's very, very slow and methodical. It's there for a reason. And then you get to the second act, which kicks into that guitar solo, the very, very heavy, crazy guitar solo after the second verse. So, just the complete opposite of that first half. The drums kick in, the guitar goes crazy, everything just starts spiking in your mind. Like, everything gets scary, and it gets really, really fast and like gut-wrenching. And when I think of this, I think this person is angry. This person is bargaining for something. You should be realizing these key words that I'm putting forward. But they're getting really, really angry, and it's getting to a fever pitch as that guitar solo ramps up further and further. In my mind, if I'm thinking of a story for this, imagine you're in a hospital, okay? And you're watching this from a waiting room. The doctor has taken aside, or the head surgeon has taken aside this man who was just in a car accident. His wife was in the car with him. This man suffered minor injuries, but his wife is on life support. That is something that very much falls in line with the Romeo and Juliet second verse. This surgeon has said, we've done all we can, but worst case scenario, we may have to pull the plug on your wife. I am really sorry. Then, just getting confronted with that, that's when the second act comes in, of the man getting angry, bargaining for anything he can do. He does not want his wife to die, but he doesn't really have a choice in the matter. That's the whole build up, the feverish pitch. He's calling out for anything to help him, anything, like God. He's praying. He wants to do something until that guitar solo finally begins to dive down, and you hear the very, very familiar opening guitar jingle from the original Blue Oyster Cult version. at this point, between Act 2 and 3, that's when you hit the depression. That depression right before you start to kick into the original version, Blue Oyster Cult's version of the blaring electric guitar. This part is the beginning of Act 3. And Act 3 is finally the point where this version of the song begins to sound eerily similar to the original Blue Oyster Cult version, using the same instruments, using the same timing, using the same everything. It's like almost one-to-one, except Danny's still singing it. And at this point, this is the acceptance. This is when the acceptance of death has finally come true, and we kind of get back into the original Don't Fear the Reaper. And the final third act, especially that third verse, the Peter Pan-esque one, that feels to me like the surgeon's like, if you want to go and have, like, you're welcome to have last words with your wife before we have to pull the plug. That third verse, especially in this version of the song, feels like it's building towards the end. It keeps on building, keeps getting more and more like crazy. And I feel like that means it's getting closer and closer and closer to the point. Closer to the time where she's going to be gone. And at this point, that's the point where the man has to finally accept in his heart that this is going to happen. So this is pretty much all I got. And if you didn't realize what I was talking about, essentially the way I've structured this, the way I feel like Ninja Sex Party structured their version of Don't Fear the Reaper is based on the Dabda concept. Now, Dabda, specifically, is the 5 stages of coping with death. This is a very, very, very common model of how we as a society confront death. And it's been said that whenever we're confronted with death, we follow these 5 basic stages of confronting death. The first one is denial, second is anger, third is bargaining, fourth is depression, five is acceptance. And they've made it clear that this coping model it can be used for more than just death. This can work for any sort of life-changing event where a loss has been imminent. But it's very, very much possible that that's how this song, the Ninja Sex Party version of the song, that's how this song kind of portrays the journey to acceptance. While Blue Oyster Cult's version focuses on the concept and it focuses on just the act of accepting that it's a real thing, Ninja Sex Party's version is kind of the prequel of the song, and it focuses on someone who is going through that journey, going through the lows that this kind of concept can bring forth, and getting to that point where they accept it in the third act, which I feel adds so much more weight to this version. It's a really cool add-on, and it brings forth extra perspectives that you didn't even fully think about if you were only listening to the Blue Oyster Cult version. I feel like it's just a really cool add-on, and I'm doing a lot of stuff with my hands because I'm really excited. So now here's the biggest question. Which do I think is better? I have... If I was to honestly say, I think I like more of the storybook aspects of the Ninja Sex Party version. But Blue Oyster Cults, you gotta have more cowbell. It's such an iconic version that I don't even know if it can... They're both just in completely different ballparks for how they come across going through the song in a way. So which one's better? I'm not exactly sure. I'm probably not the best one to to discuss that. But for the messages that both these songs convey and the way that they convey these messages, I think they both do a really, really great job of conveying different aspects of the same message. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about today. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll listen to like Busta Rhymes next time and come up with a Carter's Corner on him. I don't know. I could fucking do anything at this point. I run this ship. So, see you guys.